I'm the only speaker who actually has a scientific background. And it's great to talk to you today. The title of my presentation is "A Need for Touch is Critical in a Digital World." In the next 15 minutes or so, I'd like to embark on a journey about a scientific study that we carried out in cooperation with the University of Montreal a while ago. By way of introduction, let me say a few words about the spread and dissemination of the internet. I'm sure that you are quite familiar with these numbers. According to forecasts, next year there will be more than 3 billion internet users of mobile internet applications, the three largest platforms in terms of the user numbers. Those that have more than 1 billion users each, well, you've got Facebook, more than 2 billion, YouTube, which has 1.5 billion, and WhatsApp, which has 1.3 billion users. Now currently, and that's also an impressive figure, there are more than 4 billion internet users worldwide. And you know that the world's entire population is 7.5 billion, so this is a breathtaking figure indeed. What are these figures telling us? They're telling us that the world has become digital. In this digital world in which we're living, and let me now switch over to the study that was conducted. Well, in this world we do research. I deal with system research. I talk about the impact of ICT on humans as well as organizations. That's my research topic. And that's why we also delve into digitization. So in this study that I'm going to present to you now, what have we looked at? It has been an experimental study. And we asked quite a simple question. What's the mode of interaction between humans and machines? And recognizing screenshots, is this impacted by this interaction? We looked into two modes of interaction. Touch screens could be a tablet, a PC, or like here, a mobile device. And we compared this to a computer mouse, which is quite a relevant question if you look at the trend towards digital devices and their dissemination. Now, when we now look into these two modes of interaction and compare them, we should ask ourselves a number of questions. There are a lot of people here that are now using their smartphones. Whenever you're using smartphones or tablets, you look at the screen, and at the same time, you swipe, or you press, or you click on. So it's haptical as well as optic elements that come in. In a computer mouse situation, it's different. You've got the same two senses, but you touch the mouse and you watch the screen. So you've got the visual stimulus on the one hand, and you've got the haptic stimulus on the other hand. And those two are separate loci. So from a scientific vantage point, this question is highly intriguing. And I'm going to show to you later on, as I go on, that I also look into neurophysiological measurement techniques in my research. So what is it that we specifically did in our experiment? Now, the test subjects were seated in front of a computer. And it was about selecting products, just like online shopping, using different websites. So 14 times decisions were made involving two products each, and one of the products was a suitcase, for example. Well, we've all bought suitcases in our lives, and these were the 5 steps. So from left to right. First, we just compared the two products. We showed them, we displayed them. The logos were displayed. All the logos were and had been fictitiously generated. We didn't want to go in for any branding impact. And then we looked at the product from various perspectives. That was step 2, and then step 3, the other product. And then we listed the products again. We compared the features of those two products, those two suitcases. And finally, the test subject had to decide whether they would opt for suitcase 1 or 2. That's how the experiment was conducted. Again, touchscreen in the left picture, that's the left visual, and the right visual gives you the computer mouse situation. Everything remained constant. The mode of interaction Well, that was something that we manipulated as researchers. So our test subjects had to solve this problem. And then the experiment went on. The next task was to be accomplished. We wanted to find out more about the mode of interaction and how it impacted the recognition of visual stimuli. We looked into the product logos and whether you could actually memorize the product logos. So that was another step that we took that tied in with step one. EC caps were used in order to measure fluctuations of voltage. So we looked into this. We wanted to learn more about what's going on in the brain when it comes to recognizing the product logos. The test subjects were confronted with 70 logos that were presented to them. 20% of them, or 14 logos, were well-known logos that they had already seen during phase one. 80%, or 56 logos, were unknown logos. We just added them haphazardly to this second step. Trivial questions were asked. We just asked them, have you ever seen this logo? And the test subjects were then able to say yes or no. And they were all wearing these EC measuring caps. Okay, it was about recognizing the product logos. That was the task. And then two things need to be distinguished. It's logos that they actually saw. We had two logos that had actually already been displayed in phase one. But then other logos had never been seen. They were only presented in phase two. And that's why, as far as the logos go, we asked them, well, have you ever seen the logo? And then if someone has said yes, well, they said the right thing because they had seen the logo before. And that's the column in the middle. The right column, we asked test subjects again, have you seen the logos? And some of these they had never seen in phase one, so the correct answer is no. I've never seen this logo before. So, a high percentage rate denotes recognition. It's a quality measurement, if you like. What do you see here? Now, touchscreens, well, in both cases, touchscreens surpassed the other category, high percentage rates, than the computer mouse. Test subjects that interacted with a touchscreen, well, they were able to recognize the stimuli more clearly. But from a scientific vantage point, it's also important to point out the following. This difference is not all that large, and statistically it's not significant. So to put it in a nutshell, we could say that there's a tendency, a pattern. Yes, you memorize things more easily by using a touch screen, more easily than by using a computer mouse, but there's no statistic significance. What have we also found out? Well, we looked at the brain data, and we analyzed the data. Now, there's one region, one area in the brain, and I really just focus on the essentials. I don't want to lecture you on the brain's function and neurophysiology. There's one region called the posterior parietal cortex. And in this very area of the brain, haptic as well as optic information is processed simultaneously. There's a specific area of the brain that has this very function. These two senses are processed simultaneously. There is a higher activation regarding touchscreen than the computer mouse applications or situation. Now, whenever you have a touchscreen, these two senses are activated at the same time, the haptic and the visual stimuli. In the case of a computer mouse, things are different because you've got the haptic element regarding the mouse, but you actually watch the screen and not the mouse. So it's a conclusive result that we're seeing here. Which brings me to the final finding. Need for touch. What is need for touch? Well, it's a concept that hails from psychology and marketing, and you can define it quite easily. It's a preference for generating information through the haptic system and a preference for using information generated this way. This is a definition that comes from the scientific literature. Let me briefly give you an example. This need for touch concept is quite important in the area of marketing. There are people, and whenever they buy something, well, they want to actually feel and touch the articles they're buying, which means that they're more likely to buy them. So the need for touch concept can be used for marketing. What's also important to note is that need for touch can be measured quite easily. There is a host of reliable questionnaires. Just by asking a few questions, you can actually develop an overall scenario. So how do you gauge the need for touch in a human being? And I'm going to show to you how this works later on. Let's now come back to the experiment. Of course, in our experiment, we also measured need for touch with our test subjects. And what is the result? Now, it may look a bit scientific at first glance, but really it's quite banal in terms of the findings of this analysis. Just look at the x-axis. What you have plotted here is the need for touch level. It's a scale of 1 to 7, but in other questionnaires, the scale might be 1 to 5. What's important to know that on the x-axis, you've got the need for touch levels as measured by the questionnaire. What's plotted on the y-axis is the probability of actually being able to recognize a logo that you've already seen. Well, that's one of our benchmarks in order to be able to measure recognition or recall. So the first green line, 4, it's a need for touch level of 4 as plotted on the x-axis. Just go up. That's the intersection between the touch screen and the computer mouse graphs. What does this mean? Well, this means that people that have an average need for touch level of roughly 4, well, their probability is just the same whether it's touchscreen interaction or computer mouse situations, the same probability of actually recognizing content or recalling. Now, in the right, you've got the main finding of our study. What you can see here is the following. Now, if there's a high level, the highest need for touch level, our scale stops at 7. Well, people that have a very high need for touch level, well, provided they use the touch screen for their interaction, the probability is much higher, the probability of recall. It's about 65% as plotted on the y-axis, compared to people who also have a high need for touch level, but who used a computer mouse for their interaction. Their level of probability is just below 40%, which means that there is a probability delta of 25% or difference, which is highly significant. So let me now draw some conclusions. Well, you can illustrate this graphically as follows. We looked into the modes of interaction and the impact on screen recall. What we found is that there seems to be an advantage regarding touchscreen devices compared to mouse interaction. So there's higher recall or recognition, but this relationship between modes of interaction and recognizing screen, well, that is changed by need for touch. People that have a very high need for touch level, well, they have a certain need. They want to interact with touchscreen devices, and we've also found that they are able to memorize content a lot better. That's the main finding. What's also important to note is, well, why is it that people, once they're grown-ups, have a high need for touch level? Well, there's one reason. Just think about how they grew up. Well, these are the two images in the lower left corner. So if their parents were very caring, if they were touched a lot by their parents, well, that will enhance the probability, meaning they will also be touchy-feely later on. But the same goes for other areas as well. this doesn't just apply to hugging people, but also to wanting to touch products that they want to buy. So what's the implication? And it's very important for me to note this here. So, should the publishers in future publish digitally only? Well, that would be wrong. This cannot be gleaned from our research results because we just looked at two modes of interaction that have nothing to do with a paper-based newspaper or magazine. What we know is that omni-channel publishing is best, meaning all the channels are utilized. Why is this so interesting? Let me just give you an example that comes from my own life. Now, once a week, I go to a sauna with a good friend of mine. I come from Linz in Upper Austria, and I like reading stuff. So I interact a lot by using a tablet, but of course, when I go to the sauna, I don't use the tablet, but a newspaper, because I can fold the newspaper, put it in my sauna bag, maybe next to my lounge chair, and it may get wet. Well, doesn't really matter. So what's your lesson learned? There are a lot of reasons why readers go for a specific medium, and you always have to take this into consideration. You cannot anticipate everything in advance. You can't say a reader will respond in this way or in that way in a given situation. So if you are able to go for omnichannel publishing from a financial point of view, you should actually go for that. All right, last but not least, let me now turn to the need for a touch measurement technique that we used in our questionnaires. I've brought along some information sheets with our URL. So use Chrome or a Firefox to access these sites. The key is ENC 2018. That's what you have to enter. And this brings you to this very site. The terms and conditions, of course, need to be clicked on. That's important in terms of data protection. But of course, we then delete the data afterwards, and you are anonymous. That's just a small gadget that we have developed for you. So you access these pages. It's a short questionnaire involving 6 questions. Just fill out the questionnaire. We have an English questionnaire allowing everyone to fill it out. And at the very end, you get a graphic representation of your own need for touch level, ranging from -2 to +2. 0 is the middle. If you have a positive level, you are touchy-feely. If you have a negative score, you don't, or you're not. And your own level has also been compared to the median level of everyone who's participated, which brings me to the end of my presentation. I would like to thank you very much for your attention, and if you're interested, if you want to learn about this type of research or find out more about this type of research, well, why don't you visit this website, www.neurois.org. This is where we present research that looks into the neurophysiological and psychological implications of interactions involving humans that use ICTs. So we want to present it there and measure it. That's our research remit. And with this, I would like to thank you very much for your attention.